Hey guys, Greg Benz here. Photographer Howard Thompson sent me his image last week asking how to remove the white pipe behind this farm equipment. It's a very tricky job due to all the fine metal detail in front of the pipe, but the image would fail to convey the sense of nostalgia you feel in rural Arkansas if you couldn't get rid of it. So in this tutorial, you'll learn how you can use luminosity masks to tackle impossible clone jobs like this. The first thing we need to do is clone over this pipe area. We need to create a new background to replace the missing pixels behind the white pipe. So I'm going to hit Command or Control J to create a duplicate of the background and rename it clone. We'll do all our cloning on this layer, and it's not going to be pretty to start. It's just going to get this covered up, and then we'll reveal it where we need it. So let's go and grab the spot healing brush and take care of the really easy stuff, which is essentially the top edge and the left edge of this pipe. There's really nothing here that the regular old spot healing brush or the healing brush can't take care of. So let's use that where it's going to work. And that looks nice and clean. And then maybe we can clean up this last little bit here, see how that does. That looks fine. The rest of this, though, is not going to work quite so easily. If we try and brush this out, as I come down here, you're going to see that you get all sorts of weird metal and other stuff. It just can't find good content when you have so much surrounding clutter. So we're going to switch to a different tool. Let's go grab the patch tool. And with that, we can make a nice generous selection. Make sure you leave a wide margin around the target here. And we'll just click and drag this over, making sure it's reasonably aligned and something like that. And you can see that in the areas of the pipe there, that looks nice and clean. And if we look kind of before and after, see this edge isn't going to quite work. So I'm going to hit Command D to deselect, just hit Shift J to go back to the spot healing brush, and I can kind of quick clean up any edges that didn't work the way that I wanted them. So now we have a nice clean area over the pipe itself. Now the rest of this pipe here, we'll just go back to the patch tool there with Command or Control J. And again, nice generous margins around it. Click and drag to go find a new source. Let go, let that fill. And I'm not necessarily looking for, let's undo that. Not necessarily looking for perfection here because we have a lot of detail. So what looks a little bit weird right now probably is going to look fine once we blend things in just to show that pipe. So I'm going to look around, try and find something that looks like a good match for this area. And it's not perfect. Maybe just grab something in here, deselect that. I think that's going to be credible once we blend everything. So you can see we've gone and hidden all of the white pipe. We just have to get rid now of all the excess stuff we did everywhere else around it with some blending of layers. We can also quick check by bringing the opacity down, and now I can see where that pipe is and just quickly zoom in and make sure we've got a pretty good match. And I don't see any obvious areas where we got new red metal thrown over that white pipe. So I think that's going to work fine. And if it's not, we can do some more work later to fix it. So we'll just bring the opacity back up. And now what I want to do is restore this metal. What we can do is go to the background, hit Command or Control J again, drag it up to the top, and we'll rename this to metal. And what we can do is now reveal the red metal in front of the areas that we've cloned to kind of bring everything together. Now we can take advantage of a luminosity mask because this red metal structure has a nice clean color differentiation. In Lumenzia, go click on the red swatch at the top here, and you can see you've got a nice preview of the various parts of the metal structure. It's not strongly selected, so I'm going to make it more powerful by going to the levels layer and just bring in the whites. Well, probably really all the way. I don't normally make hard edge selections, but when you're working with cloning, it's usually the thing you want to do. And I think that'll actually work pretty well. It's not perfect because you can see it's bringing in, for example, parts of the pipe that we don't want, but that's easy enough to fix that. So we'll do a little refining. What we do is click on the metal layer and then click mask to apply our preview as a layer mask on that metal layer. And you can see that this layer now is revealing parts of that metal structure to clean things up. We need to start fixing this mask though. So let's click on this mask, or even before we do that, I'm going to click on the paintbrush here to make sure I can't paint on these pixels because this is just a duplicate of the background and we have no reason to change it. Click on the mask now, hitting B for my brush. I've got black paint as my foreground paint, making my brush a little bit bigger, and let's just zoom in and we'll just go along and quickly paint out these areas of the mask that we don't need to be revealing the pipe here, obviously. And there's really nothing fancy needed other than just a brush for these areas that are isolated from the rest of the image. So just kind of brush them out and Once we start getting into this other finer detail, we can zoom in and try and clean things up a little bit better. For example, here, right to these edges, I don't need to worry about that right now. We'll come back for that. You can see that the cloning has kind of gotten in this area. We can just remove that. We don't really need to see that here. Actually, the clone itself is a problem there. So I'm going to put a layer mask on the clone by just clicking on mask. And now with a black brush, we can hide the cloning because I only need the cloning over the pipe, and it's easy to just remove that there. So if you can use a simple brush, do that. Now go back to the top layer, and we're just going to keep cleaning up this metal layer on top, this duplicate of the farm equipment that has this extra detail here. When it comes to these areas that are close to other pieces, I'm not going to worry about them just yet. We'll come back with a luminosity selection for the fine detail, but right now I just want to kind of go through and remove any bulk stuff. Like this kind of stuff you can kind of clean up a bit, and we'll just kind of fix that in a minute. So at this point, I think I could probably go and start working with the luminosity mask to get a little bit more precisely targeted at these white fragments of the pipe. So I'm going to go click on, let's say a lights preview, and I'm going to customize this preview by color by clicking on this color conversion, and let's eliminate the red so we're not affecting the metal. Eliminate the yellows, we don't really need that. And now what we have is something that's really targeting these white pipe areas pretty cleanly. It's not perfect, but it's going to really help us a lot. So we'll click on cell to make that a selection. And now with that as our active selection, you can see the cell button's green. When we go paint black on this layer mask, it's only going to reveal it in the areas that were lighter and not red or green. And you can see how little areas here, like the edge of this metal equipment, how nicely that will clean things up. It's not getting the bottom of the pipe because it was reflecting some of the red color. So that's another question. We'll have to come back and fix that in a moment. But we can get a lot of really good stuff done with this selection. So we're going to go through and just kind of clean up these edges here. And you can see these are the little details that if you're hand painting this, it would take just hours of painstaking detail to clone this in. Whereas with a luminosity selection, you can come through and pretty quickly brush things out here and remove these weird white jagged edges. And we're looking at this super close. So how clean you want to make this is really kind of a function of what's your end goal. Are you going to print this large? If so, you should spend more time and get the edges to be absolutely perfect. If it's just for social media, then you don't really need as much time. So, always be thinking about, what really does good enough look like. It's very easy to zoom into 300% here and start to see all sorts of problems that, quite frankly, aren't really an issue. It just depends on what you want to do with it. But see how nicely that cleans up these edges? It just looks really smooth and credible. And we're getting rid of that white fringing very easily by painting over these edges. Now I'm brushing by painting and then lifting and brushing again because the selection is not 100%. So I can't remove the white completely in one brush stroke. I need to take multiple brush strokes to really clean things up here. But once I brush a few times, you can see how quickly things start to just fade away and get rid of those bright edges there. And so at this point, I'm going to keep doing this and just speed things up a little bit. I think you get the picture on how this part of the clone job works. And now at this point, I'm going to deselect by hitting Command or Control D so I get rid of my luminosity selection. And I want to paint out these areas that the luminosity was not targeting. And you can see this is almost like a reflection of the metal below. So there's really no good luminosity selection that's going to pick one and not the other. We could get a little bit closer by just using a generic luminosity selection to kind of cut things off around that black edge. But I think it's fine. So I'm just going to go and freehand paint here, just taking care to get that to be kind of roughly where I want it. You can see how nicely that kind of quick cleans things up here. So, luminosity selections are not going to do everything for you. The goal is just to help reduce the work, make it more accurate and speed things up, but you are still going to have to do some manual brushing when it comes to difficult jobs like this. You can see how quickly that cleans up. Also, you can see here, some of this metal didn't come through. This is not a piece of red metal, and so the color didn't get picked up. It's not a part of this mask. So what I can do is I'm going to invert to white paint, use my brush with a smaller size, and just make sure I reveal that metal so that this is continuous here. There's just little details like this that you're going to want to bring through, and you can see I kind of painted over that edge. So I'll just switch to black, maybe paint that back a little bit, clean that up, and just kind of go through, see if there's any other problem areas here. Like for example, this probably should be revealed on the layer here. It's, it was a bright piece on the front of the metal, and so when I went through with my luminosity selection, it let me paint over that. I have some of these bits of pipe here. Zoom in and just remove that with our brush. So we're going to go and just paint this right out. We don't need to see that. It's not a piece of the metal structure on the front. It's actually the edge of the pipe where it had that little bit of sharpening halo that was coming through. And this is the kind of work, if you do this on the original raw before it's sharpened, can be a little bit easier because things like sharpening halos can sometimes mess with your masks. But that's looking, I think, really clean there. So let's zoom back and take a look from the original to after. We've done a beautiful job cleaning this up. Let's zoom in, make sure the clone overall looks pretty good from before to after. I think some of these areas I would like them to be maybe a little bit smoother. So I'm gonna go use the old healing brush tool, maybe just kind of brush over this, see if I can't fix that. If that's, I need to go to the clone layer. Let's undo that. Always good to check what you're doing. That's not coming through too well. So I think at this point, the regular clone stamp is probably the way to go. So I'm going to grab this because the healing brush, what it was doing is filling in too much of that shadow area, and that didn't look very credible. And maybe down here, this could be maybe a little bit cleaner. Just kind of smooth that out, look a little more correct. And I think that's looking pretty good from before to after. And if you want to clean up some of these edges, we can go to this clone here, B for a brush on this mask, and just kind of remove some of those edges there where it wasn't in front of the pipe. Just clean that up a little bit. I don't know, I went too far. Clean that. And if you want to sample something that looks more like this, we can spend a little more time getting that clone to be exactly the way we want it. But I think that looks really good. And then just overall, I'm going to finish this by hitting L for my lasso tool. And let's go maybe kind of remove a little chunk of this here. What I'm going to do is spotlight this with a vignette. If I go to the vignette and hold down the Alt key, it will actually lighten this area. I'm going to bring this up to the top. I should have placed it here. See how that brightens that. And now I'm going to select this area again and just click vignette for a normal vignette to darken the edges around it. And we can take this and maybe make it even a little bit stronger. And now you can see we've got the vignette and the cloning, which just nicely creates a simple rural scene in Arkansas without those distractions. The key to getting great results here were highly customized selections. Now go check out this next video on removing shadows to learn more ways you can create custom luminosity masks and selections.